The Galactic Diplomatic Station hung in the darkness like a massive jewel, its lights reflecting off the surface of the neutral moon below. Inside the grand receiving hall, something had gone terribly wrong. Queen Valara of the Syntherai Empire stood near the viewing port, her tall frame rigid with exhaustion and worry. Her skin shimmered with the faint purple hue of her people, and her elaborate robes whispered against the polished floor as she paced back and forth. But all her regal bearing couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes. Princess Kiva sat curled in an oversized chair meant for visiting dignitaries, her small body shaking with sobs that echoed through the chamber. She'd been crying for 3 days straight now, and nothing anyone did seemed to help. Her face was streaked with tears, and her breathing came in those hitching gasps that children get when they've been crying for too long. The sound cut through every conversation, disrupted every meeting, and made it impossible for anyone to focus on anything else. Station Director Hayes wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched another specialist fail to calm the child. He'd been managing this diplomatic post for 7 years, and he'd never seen anything like this. The Syntherai trade delegation had traveled for weeks to get here, representing one of the most powerful empires in the outer sectors. These negotiations were supposed to open new shipping routes, establish cultural exchange programs, and strengthen humanity's position in the galactic community. Instead, everything had ground to a complete halt because of one heartbroken little girl. The problem went deeper than simple inconvenience. Hayes had learned that in Syntherai culture, a crying royal child wasn't just sad, it was a sign. Their people believed it meant the cosmos itself was out of balance, that something fundamental was wrong with whatever venture they were undertaking. If Princess Kiva kept crying, Queen Valara would have no choice but to call off the negotiations entirely and return home. Months of preparation would be wasted. The political fallout would be severe. Alien diplomats from a dozen different worlds clustered in small groups, whispering among themselves. Some looked annoyed, checking their chronometers and wondering how long this would take. Others seemed genuinely concerned, though they had no solutions to offer. A medical specialist from the Theron Collective had examined the princess with every scanner available, finding nothing physically wrong. An entertainment coordinator from the Festive Worlds had brought toys, games, and holographic displays that usually delighted children across the galaxy. Kiva had barely looked at them. Even an empathic counselor from Vidania, someone trained to soothe emotional distress through psychic connection, had emerged from the room shaking his head in defeat. The Queen's attendants moved around her like shadows, offering refreshments she didn't touch and suggestions she'd already tried. Her guards stood at attention, faces impassive, but their discomfort was obvious. They were warriors, trained to face any threat, but they were helpless against the tears of a child. Down in the lower levels of the station, far below the diplomatic suites and conference rooms, Tom Bradley guided his cleaning cart around a corner. The wheels squeaked slightly on the metal floor, a familiar sound that had become the backdrop to his life. He'd been working night maintenance on the station for 2 years now, keeping things clean while everyone else slept. It was quiet work, solitary work, and he'd come to prefer it that way. The maintenance corridors were a different world from the gleaming halls upstairs. Here the walls were bare metal instead of decorated panels. The lighting was functional rather than atmospheric. No art hung on the walls, no viewing ports offered scenic vistas. This was where the real work of keeping the station running happened, where humans like Tom made sure everything functioned smoothly while remaining completely invisible to the important people above. Tom had learned early on that humans occupied a strange position in the galactic community. They weren't mistreated exactly, but they weren't really noticed either. Earth was still relatively new to interstellar politics, and humans filled the service roles that kept places like this running. Maintenance crews, kitchen staff, technical support. Necessary but forgettable. He'd stand aside when diplomats passed, and their eyes would slide right over him as if he were part of the furniture. He didn't mind, mostly. The pay was decent enough to send money back to his sister and her kids. The work was straightforward. And there was something peaceful about moving through empty corridors at night, making things clean and orderly, knowing he'd done his job well even if nobody noticed. His grandmother had worked as a hotel housekeeper for 40 years, and she taught him that all honest work had dignity, whether anyone acknowledged it or not. Tom emptied a waste receptacle and moved on, his mind already planning his route through the station. He'd heard something was happening upstairs, some kind of problem with the Syntherai delegation, but the details were vague. The human staff weren't kept informed about diplomatic matters. They just cleaned up afterward and kept the systems running, ghosts moving through a world that barely saw them. Tom finished cleaning the service corridors around midnight and decided to take his break in Observation Deck C. Most of the station's viewing areas were reserved for diplomats and important visitors, But Deck C was tucked away in a forgotten corner where maintenance crews could watch the stars without bothering anyone. It had become his favorite spot over the past 2 years, a place where he could sit with his coffee and remember that despite all the politics and protocols, there was still beauty in the universe. He pushed through the door expecting to find the deck empty as usual. Instead, he froze. A small figure stood pressed against the massive viewing port, silhouetted against the stars. Even from behind, Tom could see the child's shoulders shaking with sobs. 2 enormous guards flanked her, their armor gleaming in the starlight. They were HFY warriors, and they looked deeply uncomfortable. Tom recognized the situation immediately. This had to be the princess everyone was whispering about, the one causing all the problems upstairs. He started to back out quietly, not wanting to intrude, but one of the guards spotted him. The guard's hand moved to his weapon. Halt! Tom stopped, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. Sorry. Just here for my break. Didn't know anyone was using this deck. The princess's crying hitched for a moment at the sound of his voice, then continued. Tom could see her reflection in the window now. She looked so small and miserable, her fancy clothes rumpled from days of distress. Something in his chest tightened. He'd seen that kind of crying before, the deep exhaustion of a child who'd cried until there was almost nothing left. I'll just go, Tom said quietly, but as he turned, he started humming without thinking about it. An old tune his grandmother used to sing when he was upset, something soft and repetitive that didn't need words. His grandmother had called it her settling down song. The princess's sobbing quieted just a fraction. Not much, but enough to notice. The second guard straightened. What are you doing? Nothing, sir. Just an old song. I'll leave you in peace. Tom grabbed his cleaning supplies, still humming softly as he worked his way toward the door. You there? Leave. Now. The first guard's voice was sharp. Tom nodded and moved faster, but then he heard it. A small sound from the princess, something between a whimper and a protest. The guards exchanged confused glances. Before anyone could speak, the door whooshed open again. Queen Valara swept into the observation deck, her attendants trailing behind her. She looked even more exhausted than her daughter, her elegant features drawn tight with 3 days of stress and worry. Kiva, darling, please, the queen began, then stopped when she saw Tom standing there with his cleaning cart. Her eyes narrowed slightly, taking in his maintenance uniform and human features. Who are you? Tom's throat went dry. He'd never been addressed directly by alien royalty before. Tom Bradley, Your Majesty. Night maintenance. I was just leaving. The queen studied him for a long moment, and Tom saw something in her expression that surprised him. Not anger or dismissal, but a kind of desperate assessment, as if she were wondering whether this random human janitor might somehow have an answer she'd missed. You heard my daughter crying, the queen said. It wasn't a question. Yes, You were humming something. A human song. Tom felt his face grow warm. Just an old tune, Your Majesty. My grandmother used to sing it. Didn't mean any disrespect. It made her pause. The queen moved closer, her robes trailing across the deck floor. Tell me, human. Have you ever seen a child cry like this? The question caught Tom off guard. He glanced at the princess, who had turned slightly to look at him with red, swollen eyes. Something about the directness of the queen's question, the raw exhaustion in her voice, made him answer honestly instead of giving some diplomatic non-answer. Yes, Your Majesty. My niece Bethany. She's 7 now, but when she was about that age, she cried like that for 2 whole days. One of the attendants made a disapproving sound, probably shocked that this lowly janitor was comparing a royal princess to his common niece. But the queen held up a hand for silence. What made her cry so? Tom shifted his weight, uncomfortable with so many eyes on him. Her mom, my sister, had to take a job on a cargo station for 6 months. Good pay, but it meant leaving Bethany with our parents back on Earth. The kid missed her something fierce. Wouldn't eat, barely slept. Cried until she made herself sick. What helped her? The queen's voice was intent now, focused. Honestly? My mom figured it out. Bethany wasn't just missing her mama. She was missing this specific thing her mama used to make for dinner every Friday. Nothing fancy, just this simple meal, but it was their special thing together. Once my mom made it the same way, Bethany finally ate something. Didn't fix everything, but it helped her start feeling like herself again. The queen was very still. Around her, the attendants and guards looked confused, probably wondering why their ruler was having this conversation with a janitor. But Tom saw something change in the queen's expression, a flicker of recognition or maybe hope. "Tell me, Tom Bradley," she said slowly. "If a child missed a specific food from far away, something simple but meaningful, and no one could recreate it correctly, what would you do?" Tom thought about his niece, about those tear-streaked days. He thought about his grandmother in her kitchen, making things right with nothing but time and care. "I'd want someone who actually knew how to make it the real way, Your Majesty. Not fancy. Not complicated. Just someone who understood that sometimes the simple stuff matters most, especially when you're far from home and everything feels wrong." The Queen looked at her daughter, then back at Tom. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, but an understanding. The understanding of people who'd both loved children enough to want them to stop hurting. "Come with me," the Queen said. Tom's eyes widened. "Your Majesty? I wish to continue this conversation. Guards, attendants, you are dismissed. I will speak with this human alone." The protests were immediate and emphatic, but Queen Valara silenced them all with a single look. The Queen dismissed her guards and attendants with a firmness that left no room for argument. They retreated reluctantly, shooting worried glances at Tom as they filed out of the observation deck. Within moments, it was just the three of them, the Queen, her daughter, and a night shift janitor who still couldn't quite believe this was happening. Queen Valara moved to one of the benches along the viewing port and sat down. The gesture was so unexpected, so informal, that Tom just stood there awkwardly with his cleaning cart. Queens didn't sit on regular benches. They certainly didn't have casual conversations with maintenance workers. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the bench across from her. Tom sat, feeling completely out of place. Princess Kiva had stopped crying for the moment, watching this strange interaction with red, exhausted eyes. She stayed by the window, one small hand pressed against the glass. "My daughter has not eaten in 3 days," the Queen began, her voice carrying the weight of those sleepless nights. "She takes water, barely, but refuses all food. Our medical specialists find nothing wrong with her physically. She simply will not eat." Tom nodded, staying quiet and letting her talk. 2 years ago, there was a cultural exchange. The Syntharii Empire sent a delegation to Earth to study your planet's customs, art, and society. I brought Kiva with me. She was younger then, still learning about worlds beyond our own. The Queen's expression softened with memory. "We visited many places. Museums, theaters, natural wonders. But what she loved most was the food. Your Earth has such variety, such different flavors from what we know." Princess Kiva made a small sound, almost a whimper. The Queen glanced at her daughter with obvious pain. "There was one meal in particular. We were in a city called Philadelphia, meeting with your planetary representatives. The formal dinner was elaborate, many courses. But Kiva wandered away from the main table and ended up in a smaller room where the human staff were eating. One of your people, a kind woman, offered to share her meal with my curious daughter." Tom was starting to understand. "What was the meal, Your Majesty?" "That is the problem. Kiva was young, and she did not know your language well then. She cannot describe it properly. Our translators struggle. The woman who made it, we do not know her name or where she is now. We have only fragments, impressions." The Queen looked directly at Tom. "Kiva remembers red liquid, warm and smooth. She remembers golden bread, crispy on the outside with something melted inside. She remembers dipping the bread into the liquid." Tom felt a smile tugging at his lips despite the seriousness of the situation. "Your Majesty, that sounds like tomato soup and grilled cheese." The Queen leaned forward. "Those words, our computer translators have suggested them. But every attempt to recreate this meal has failed. The station's chefs have tried 17 different versions. The food replicators have produced 43 variations. Kiva rejects them all. She takes one bite, begins crying harder, and pushes it away." "Because it's not right," Tom said softly. "It's close, but it's not the same." "Explain." Tom thought about how to put it into words. "Your Majesty, with respect to your chefs and the replicators, they're probably trying to make it fancy. Elevated, like they call it. They're thinking about it like it's some special dish that needs to impress people. But that's not what tomato soup and grilled cheese is. It's simple food. Comfort food. The kind of thing regular folks make when they want something warm and easy and familiar." The Queen was listening intently. Princess Kiva had turned away from the window, watching Tom now. "The woman who shared her meal with your daughter, she probably made it the way millions of humans make it. Nothing complicated. White bread, the cheap kind that comes in plastic bags. American cheese, the processed stuff that melts really smooth. Butter on the outside of the bread, fry it in a pan until it's golden and crispy. The soup probably came from a can, heated up on the stove, maybe with a little milk stirred in to make it creamy. That's it. That's the whole thing. So simple, the Queen murmured. That's why it works, Tom said. It's not about being fancy. It's about being exactly what it is, no more and no less. When you're a kid and you eat something like that, especially if someone makes it for you with kindness, it sticks with you. It becomes more than just food. The Queen stood and walked to her daughter. She knelt down, speaking softly in their language. Kiva responded, her voice hoarse from crying. They went back and forth for a moment, then the Queen returned to Tom. She says the chefs made it taste wrong. Too many flavors, she says. Too complicated. Not like the kind woman made it. The Queen's jaw tightened. We have traveled so far. These negotiations are crucial for my people. But I cannot ask my daughter to suffer, and I cannot proceed with talks while she weeps. Our customs will not allow it. Tom understood what she wasn't saying. If this didn't get resolved, the whole delegation would leave. All those carefully planned agreements would fall apart. Your Majesty, he said carefully, if you'd permit it, I could make tomato soup and grilled cheese for the princess. The real way. The way that woman probably made it. The words hung in the air. The Queen stared at him, and Tom saw calculations happening behind her eyes. She was weighing options, considering possibilities, probably thinking about what her advisors would say. You are a maintenance worker, she said finally. Yes, You clean floors and empty waste receptacles. That's right. And you believe you can succeed where trained chefs and advanced replicators have failed. Tom met her eyes. Your Majesty, those chefs and replicators are too good at their jobs. They know too much, they try too hard. Sometimes what you need is just somebody who knows how to make regular food the regular way, because that's what they grew up eating. My grandmother made tomato soup and grilled cheese for me 100 times. I've made it for my niece. It's not fancy, but I know how to do it right. The Queen looked at her daughter again. Kiva was watching Tom with something like hope in her tired eyes, as if she understood somehow that this strange human might actually know what she needed. If I permit this, the Queen said slowly, and you fail, the disappointment will be severe. I understand, Your Majesty. My attendants will be scandalized. The diplomatic corps will object. Director Hayes will likely try to stop it. Yes? Probably. A long silence stretched between them. Then Queen Valara straightened to her full height, and Tom saw the steel that made her a ruler of worlds. Then we will not ask their permission. We will simply do it. Come, Tom Bradley. You will make this meal for my daughter, and we will see if simple human food can solve what all our sophistication could not. Getting to the service kitchen turned into an adventure all by itself. The Queen insisted on going immediately, while her daughter was calm and before the attendants could organize another formal attempt at feeding her. They took a service elevator that Tom usually rode alone, the Queen standing tall in her elaborate robes while Tom clutched his cleaning cart awkwardly in the corner. Princess Kiva held her mother's hand, stealing glances at Tom every few seconds. When the elevator doors opened on the kitchen level, they nearly walked straight into a food service worker named Rita carrying a tray of supplies. Her eyes went wide as dinner plates when she saw the Syntherii Queen stepping out of the maintenance elevator. Is that, oh my God, Your Majesty? Rita stammered, almost dropping her tray. We require use of a kitchen, Queen Valara announced. This human will prepare food for my daughter. Rita looked at Tom like he'd grown a second head. They'd worked the same shifts for months, sharing break room coffee and complaining about the heating system. Now he was apparently cooking for alien royalty. Tom? You're cooking for the princess. Apparently, Tom said, feeling his face flush. The main kitchen, it's being used right now for the diplomatic dinner prep. A smaller kitchen will suffice, the Queen interrupted. Somewhere quiet. Rita pulled herself together, her professional training kicking in despite the absurdity of the situation. The staff kitchen. Down the hall, third door on the left. It's basic, but it has everything you need for simple cooking. They made their way down the corridor, passing other kitchen workers who stopped and stared. Tom could already imagine the gossip that would spread through the station by morning. The weird human janitor who somehow ended up cooking for an alien princess in the middle of the night. His supervisor was going to have questions he didn't know how to answer. The staff kitchen was exactly what Rita had described, basic. It had 4 electric burners, a small oven, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, and a stainless steel counter that had seen better days. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive. Just a place where tired workers could heat up meals during their shifts. "This is acceptable," Queen Valara said, though Tom suspected any kitchen would have been acceptable at this point. Princess Kiva stood in the doorway, watching Tom with those big, tired eyes. He could see the hope there, mixed with fear that she'd be disappointed again. It made his chest tight. This kid had been let down so many times over the past 3 days. He really didn't want to be one more failure on that list. Tom washed his hands thoroughly at the sink, then started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. White bread, the cheap sandwich kind in the plastic wrapper. A package of American cheese singles, each slice individually wrapped in plastic. Butter. A can of tomato soup from the shelf. Some milk. That was it. The simplest possible ingredients. "Okay," Tom said, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's do this right." He set a pan on the burner and turned it to medium heat. Not too hot. That was the first mistake people made, cranking the heat too high and burning everything. He opened the can of soup and poured it into a small pot, adding about a quarter cup of milk and stirring gently. Princess Kiva edged closer, drawn by curiosity. The queen stayed back, but Tom could feel her watching his every move. "So the thing about grilled cheese," Tom said, talking as he worked, "is that it's all about patience. You can't rush it. My grandmother, she used to say that good food takes the time it takes, and trying to hurry just ruins everything." He buttered 2 slices of bread on one side each, then laid them butter side down in the warming pan. The butter started to sizzle softly. He unwrapped 2 slices of cheese and laid them on one piece of bread. "People always want to add stuff," Tom continued, keeping his voice calm and steady. "They want to put in fancy cheeses, or herbs, or bacon, or whatever. And that stuff can be good, sure. But that's not what this is. This is just bread, butter, and cheese. That's the whole point." The kitchen filled with the smell of toasting bread and melting butter. It was such a simple, familiar smell, but Tom saw Princess Kiva's expression change. Her eyes widened. She took a step closer, then another. "You're smelling it, aren't you?" Tom said gently. "Starting to remember?" The princess nodded, not taking her eyes off the pan. Tom checked the underside of the bread. Golden brown, exactly right. He placed the second slice on top and carefully flipped the whole sandwich. The brown side was perfect, crispy and golden with the butter making it shine just a little. The cheese inside was starting to melt, getting soft and gooey. "Almost there," he said. "Just need to give this other side time to get the same color." He stirred the soup, watching it steam gently. Not boiling, just hot enough. He tasted a spoonful, checking the temperature and flavor. Basic tomato soup, nothing special, exactly what it should be. Behind him, he heard the queen speaking softly to her daughter in their language. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Hope, mixed with caution. "Don't get too excited yet, just in case." Tom flipped the sandwich one more time to check both sides. Perfect. He turned off the burner and moved the sandwich to a cutting board. With a sharp knife, he cut it diagonally from corner to corner. That was important somehow, though he'd never quite understood why. Grilled cheese just looked more right when it was cut on the diagonal. He poured the soup into a simple white bowl, nothing fancy. No garnish, no artistic drizzle, just soup in a bowl the way normal people served it. He put the sandwich halves on a plain plate and carried both to the counter where Princess Kiva stood. The princess stared at the food. Tom saw her hands trembling slightly. "It's hot, so be careful," he said quietly. "Maybe try dipping the sandwich in the soup. That's how a lot of folks eat it." For a long moment, nobody moved. The queen held her breath. Tom found himself holding his too. Everything hung on this moment, the negotiations, the political relationships, the queen's peace of mind. But more than that, there was a kid standing in front of him who just wanted something familiar in a universe that felt too big and strange. Princess Kiva picked up one triangle of the sandwich with both hands. She brought it to her nose and inhaled deeply. Her eyes closed. When they opened again, they were brimming with fresh tears, but different tears this time. She took a bite. The crunch of the toasted bread seemed impossibly loud in the quiet kitchen. Tom watched her chew, saw her face transform. She took another bite, bigger this time, then dunked the rest of the sandwich in the soup just like he'd suggested. Soup dripped down her chin. She didn't care. She ate like she was starving, because she was. Queen Valara's hand went to her mouth. Her own eyes were wet. Princess Kiva ate both halves of the sandwich, then picked up the bowl and drank the soup directly from it, abandoning any pretense of formal manners. When she finally set the empty bowl down, she looked at Tom and spoke in her own language. The Queen translated, her voice thick with emotion. She says thank you. She says it tastes exactly right. She says it tastes like kindness. Tom felt his throat tighten. You're welcome, Princess. The little girl smiled for the first time in 3 days. Word spread through the station faster than Tom could have imagined. By morning, everyone knew the story. The alien princess who wouldn't stop crying. The fancy chefs who couldn't help. The human janitor who made simple soup and a sandwich that somehow fixed everything. The details got exaggerated with each retelling, but the core truth remained. A maintenance worker had succeeded where experts had failed. Tom tried to go about his normal routine, but it was impossible. People kept stopping him in the corridors. Other human workers clapped him on the shoulder or gave him knowing smiles. Even some of the alien staff members nodded to him respectfully instead of looking past him like they usually did. It was deeply uncomfortable. He'd spent 2 years perfecting the art of being invisible, and now everyone saw him. The trade negotiations resumed the next day. Princess Kiva ate breakfast without complaint, then lunch, then dinner. She was still homesick, still missed her own world, but she wasn't drowning in misery anymore. The cosmic balance, according to Syntherai belief, had been restored. Queen Valara could proceed with her diplomatic work. Tom figured that was the end of it. He'd done his strange little part in galactic politics, and now life would return to normal. He'd be invisible again, just another human pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways. That was fine with him. More than fine, really. But 3 days later, Director Hayes summoned him to his office. Tom climbed the stairs to the administrative level with growing dread. He'd probably violated a dozen protocols by cooking for the princess without permission. Maybe they were going to fire him. Send him back to Earth. He tried to think of how he'd explain this to his sister. Hayes sat behind his desk, looking stressed and uncomfortable. Tom, sit down. Tom Saturday. The Syntherai delegation is preparing to depart, Hayes began. The negotiations concluded successfully this morning. Very successfully, actually. The Queen is pleased. That's good, sir. Hayes drummed his fingers on the desk. She's requested your presence at the closing ceremony. Tonight. 6 o'clock, main hall. Tom blinked. Sir. I know. Believe me, I know how irregular this is. Closing ceremonies are for diplomats, delegates, heads of state. Not for. Hayes gestured vaguely at Tom's uniform. Janitors, Tom finished. I was going to say maintenance personnel, but yes. Hayes rubbed his temples. I told her it wasn't appropriate. I explained our protocols. She didn't care. She was very insistent that you be there, and frankly, after the negotiations went so well, I'm not in a position to deny her requests. Tom felt a knot forming in his stomach. What do I have to do? Just show up. Stand there. She wants to acknowledge you publicly, apparently. Hayes looked at him with something between sympathy and bewilderment. Tom, I've been running this station for 7 years. I've seen a lot of strange things. But a maintenance worker being honored at a diplomatic ceremony? That's a first. That evening, Tom put on the cleanest uniform he owned and made his way to the main hall. His hands were sweating. He'd been in this hall before, of course, but only to clean it during the night shift when it was empty. He'd never seen it full of people, blazing with lights, humming with important conversations in a dozen different languages. He tried to slip in quietly through a side entrance, but a Syntherai attendant was waiting for him. Tom Bradley? Come with me, please. She led him through the crowd. Tom felt hundreds of eyes tracking him as he passed. Human service workers lined the walls, watching with expressions ranging from pride to confusion. Alien diplomats whispered to each other, clearly wondering who this human was and why he was being escorted to the front. The attendant positioned him near the central platform where Queen Valara would speak. Tom wanted to disappear into the floor. This was wrong. He didn't belong here with these important people in their expensive clothes and their political power. He was just a guy who mopped floors and knew how to make a sandwich. The lights dimmed. Queen Valara stepped onto the platform, Princess Kiva beside her. The little girl looked completely different from the miserable child Tom had met in the observation deck. She wore fresh clothes, her face was calm, and she actually smiled when she spotted Tom in the crowd. The Queen began her speech, talking about the negotiations, the agreements reached, the friendship between the Syntherai Empire and the various worlds represented. Her words were translated into multiple languages through devices everyone wore. Tom barely listened. He was too busy trying to breathe normally and not pass out from nervousness. Then the Queen's tone changed. Before we conclude, I must address something important. A truth that my people had forgotten, and that I was reminded of here on this station. The whole went quiet. When my daughter was suffering, I sought help from the finest minds available. Medical specialists, entertainers, counselors. Each one failed, not through lack of skill or effort, but because they approached the problem with complexity when what was needed was simplicity. They saw a princess who required sophisticated solutions. They did not see a child who needed basic kindness. The Queen gestured toward Tom. This human saw what others missed. Tom Bradley works as maintenance personnel on this station. He cleans your floors, empties your waste bins, keeps your environment functioning. Most of you have never noticed him. I certainly had not, until the moment my daughter needed help and he offered it without hesitation, without thought of reward or recognition. Tom's face burned hot. Every eye in the hall was on him now. He made a simple meal with his own hands, the Queen continued. Nothing elaborate, nothing expensive. Just basic food prepared with care and understanding. In doing so, he gave my daughter what all our technology and expertise could not: comfort, connection, and the feeling of being truly seen. She stepped down from the platform and walked directly to Tom. The crowd parted for her. Tom's heart hammered in his chest. My people have a saying, Queen Valara said, speaking directly to him now. The measure of a civilization is not in its greatest achievements, but in how it treats those who serve. She held up a small medallion on a silver chain. Tom Bradley, I name you friend to the Syntherii crown. When you tire of mopping floors, you have a place in my world. Not as a servant, but as someone we value. She placed the medallion around his neck. The metal was warm and surprisingly heavy. Tom's throat was too tight to speak. He managed a nod. Princess Kiva stepped forward and hugged him around the waist. Thank you, she whispered in accented English. Thank you for seeing me. The hall erupted in applause. Not polite diplomatic clapping, but real applause. Tom saw other human workers crying, their faces full of something he couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Recognition. The feeling of being seen after years of being invisible. The ceremony concluded shortly after. Diplomats began filing out, some stopping to shake Tom's hand or nod respectfully. Director Hayes approached, looking stunned. That was? I don't even know what that was. Me neither, sir, Tom admitted. You're going to be famous, you know. This is going to be all over the galactic networks by morning. The human janitor who helped an alien princess. Tom touched the medallion around his neck. I just made soup and a sandwich, sir. You did more than that, Hayes said quietly. A lot more. Later that night, after the crowds had dispersed and the dignitaries had retired to their quarters, Tom returned to his regular duties. He filled his cleaning cart, grabbed his supplies, and started his usual route through the station. Some things didn't change. Floors still needed mopping. Waste bins still needed emptying. The work still needed doing. But as he moved through the corridors, he noticed differences. A junior diplomat nodded to him in passing instead of looking through him. A group of Theron workers called out "Good evening, Tom" as he passed their station. A human cafeteria worker gave him a thumbs up through a window. Tom made his way to Observation Deck C for his break. He sat on his usual bench, sipping coffee from his thermos and watching the stars wheel slowly past. The medallion hung around his neck, a strange weight he wasn't used to yet. He thought about his grandmother, about all those years she'd spent cleaning hotel rooms and making meals for her grandkids. She'd always insisted that honest work had dignity, whether anyone acknowledged it or not. She'd been right, but Tom was starting to understand something else. Sometimes people did acknowledge it. Sometimes being seen for who you really were, servant or princess, janitor or queen, made all the difference in the universe. A small face appeared at the observation deck window. Princess Kiva, pressed against the glass from the corridor outside. She saw Tom and waved enthusiastically. He waved back, smiling. The princess disappeared, probably being hustled off to bed by her attendants. Tom finished his coffee and returned to work. There were still 5 more levels to clean before his shift ended. The station didn't maintain itself. But as he pushed his cart down the corridor, humming his grandmother's old tune, the hallways didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a little alien girl was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of simple kindness and the taste of home.